Hi, I'm Teresa Baglietto, host of In Shock Radio. Like many of you, I have faced my share of challenges. From cancer to job loss, divorce to financial hardship, you name it, I have experienced it. This podcast is about overcoming life's toughest moments and finding the courage and strength to keep going. So tune in to unleash your inner strength and discover how to move forward, no matter what life throws your way. Hi, happy Monday. This episode is going to feel like catching up with an old friend because it is. I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend, Amorette. She and I have known each other since we were in elementary school, complete besties. We were Charlie Brown obsessed. I was Woodstock and she was Snoopy. And honestly, those nicknames stuck with us for years. You know those friendships that just click? That was us. We were completely inseparable. We did everything together. Well, life, as it often does, takes us in different paths. As we grew up, we both moved around a lot, living in different states, but somehow we always managed to stay connected. And it's funny how life works, right? Even when you're not talking to your friend on a daily basis, your lives can seem like you've never skipped a beat. And our lives were parallel to each other in some wild ways. We both navigated the choppy waters of breast cancer. We trudged through some very difficult divorces. We said goodbye to both of our parents. And of course, faced our fair share of bumps along the way. But Amorette's journey, like so many of ours, has had its own unique twists and turns. And today we're going to dive into a part of her story that takes a lot of courage to share. Drug and alcohol addiction is a complex and deeply challenging situation. I know that it can affect individuals on multiple levels, both physically, psychologically, socially, emotionally. It's hard to watch a loved one go through that. She woke up one day, grabbed a hold of the reins, and decided to change her life. She chose to kick a habit that had become a daily part of her existence. Today, we're going to get a glimpse into what Amorette's life was like during her addiction, and more importantly, how she overcame it. Hi, Amorette. It is so wonderful to have you here today.
Hi, really good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Isn't it amazing how life brings us back together after all these years?
I can't believe it. I was doing the math. I guess we met like 7 years old. I mean, we known one another for
Right. We won't put the age out there. It's been forever.
forever. Let me see how I did that.
We're going to be talking about your journey through addiction and the courage you found to turn it around. Can you talk about what your life was like before addiction?
It seems like an element of addiction was swirling around me from the day I was born. There's a history of addiction in my family, my grandparents and my mom, that generational curse. I didn't really know what it was. I knew that there were some family issues and such, and there's some mental illness on my mom's side, or with my mom. But when I really started down my path, and I remember the moments, my kind of FU moments, and I was like, 13, and there was all kinds of stuff happening in the family. My sister had moved, and my parents were a little bit MIA, and my mom was in a deep path of what she was going through. And I'd always been this great kid for the most part. And you knew me back then, which is so funny that we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
I always excelled in school and loved my animals and participated and did all of those things. I'm the youngest and was kind of left to my own devices. I remember I found my mom had blackberry brandy of all things. And I found it. And I remember in that moment, I'm just going to drink it. And I did. and it changed a chip inside of me and opened the door of major escapism, of course. And so that, then you drinking, smoking weed, and all those things, starting kind of in junior high. And that was really the start, the races for me. And it continued throughout my life over decades. And so it's kind of, when you ask the question, what was life like before addiction? I don't really have an answer because I didn't really know life before.
What was your form of escape?
I went through different cycles. I would say the one that was with me the longest and the hardest for me to overcome and the most difficult to acknowledge, one that I wanted to keep near and dear to me, was alcohol. I had a raging cocaine addiction when I was in my late teens, 18, 19. Through a series of surgeries and things like that, I developed a raging painkiller addiction. And even before that, when I was at the height of my professional career, I developed a raging addiction to Xanax. So I kind of had these circular things and addictions that I went through. But the base one, as I said, that was the most difficult to get through was alcohol, easily.
That's the most accessible one, right?
Yeah. I say that the biggest addiction was alcohol. I suppose the biggest addiction really was getting out of myself. Fundamentally, it was escaping the central being of who I am. And that was appealing to me, I guess, on certain levels of not wanting or not being able to. I shouldn't say not wanting. I not being able to kind of handle or understand the complexities of who I am as a human being, and some of the emotional stuff or things that it had happened or were happening. It was just much easier to escape. And I leaned into that for a very long time.
Yeah. If you dove into the blackberry alcohol at such a young age and discovered that it numbed all of these thoughts that you were trying to escape from, I could see where that becomes really appealing because that stuff's no longer in your brain. You're now relaxed. I would imagine the craving for an escape like alcohol or drugs only increased over time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I had really great success at a relatively young age and kind of hit that. In that respect, I was a quick study. But in other respects, I'm a late bloomer. The internal growth, because I wasn't like a lot of coping mechanisms were taught. You just figured it out. And without understanding or learning certain ways or healthy ways of coping, it wasn't until the past 18 months of learning how to handle things more, in a more healthy way.
We were in our 20s when we got together after elementary school. You and I were, let's have a good time. Life is fantastic because we're all in this space of FUN, right?
Yeah.
So I couldn't see that there was a problem when we got together because what you were doing matched what I was doing.
Yeah.
I had a different reason, which was, hey, let's have fun. And you're like, I want to numb everything that's going on in my life because this is an amazing feeling for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It was certainly the fun quotient, of course, but there were other deeper layers that I didn't even realize at the time.
What do you think some of your lowest points were during your addiction?
Oh, gosh. So many. I think most recently, just dealing with the most recent, when I was diagnosed with my first cancer, I was actively using throughout that first diagnosis while I was going through chemo, while I was going through radiation. And I understood why I did that. It was an act of defiance. And I think it was, I was, fearful, of course, because it's so shocking when you're going through these things that are really intense. And I didn't have the emotional capacity to reach out to friends and family. I was always like, I got this. Don't worry about me. So it was a very lonely journey that I chose to take. I was actively using through both of my diagnoses. The second one, and I had all the surgeries and, had pain medication. Then I had a major back issue, and that required two surgeries. I'd gotten so deep into the painkillers that essentially I wouldn't even recognize myself thinking back on that person, but ultimately really lost everything, lost relationships, lost any kind of working thing. I had a beautiful home in LA, I had a beautiful home in Palm Springs. I basically lost them both. Foreclosed or anything like that. Essentially just had to start completely over, and moved and back to Texas, where I swear I'd never go back. And
where it all started.
Gone was the elite status within an industry that I'd worked so hard to have. Gone were the expensive and sexy embellishments in terms of home and all of that stuff. And I've been stripped down to nothing, but I still had my raging addiction. And that was the lowest points.
You were wildly successful. I remember you hit your stride in success long before I did. And I was always so impressed and proud. I didn't realize there was an addiction problem. I think the second time we got together was when we were both going through some really shitty divorces. Yep. We were in San Francisco, and I remember this vividly. We leaned into our dear buddy, Don Julio.
Yes.
Saw those specifically. And again, we were doing this together, and it seemed to me that, hey, we're going through crappy divorces. It's really hard. And this is our way to cope. And it's temporary. We went to a restaurant together in LA, and we both had a couple of drinks. But it wasn't until we got in the car and you were driving that I was scared shitless, because I was like, what the fuck? How is she so fucked up? And we drank the same amount of booze. And you're taller than I am. I just couldn't figure that one out. I might have said, you need to slow down. You're scaring me. For you, it was, hey, this is all good. Nothing's going to happen. Don't worry about it. It wasn't until we got back to your home that I realized there's something else going on. I just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, God, I'm so sorry for that. I would imagine I was in the middle of the full-on pill addiction, and you stack all that stuff up and you're not even the person who you really are. You just described that experience, and I am certain there's probably another 100 just like it that stack up over time. I knew there was a point where things had gone totally off the reservation, and I knew I had a problem, a big problem. How do you get out of it? The physical withdrawal from those drugs is awful. I'd been to rehab twice. It was a combination of alcohol and benzodiazepine, Xanax, basically. So I had to be medically taken off that because that'll kill you. I had another stint in rehab, and it was a similar thing. There's a whole backstory of what the hell happened with the second rehab. But this time, I was like, well, two things. I couldn't afford to go to rehab because I'd lost everything. How do I stop the taper theory? That's not going to happen for me. So I went cold turkey, and it's been almost 5 years now, off of opiates. In Texas, when I'd moved there, I sealed myself up. And when I say the amount of drugs that I was taking was astronomical, I mean, 500 pills a month plus.
Wow.
It was monster amounts, and spending every bit of money that I had in getting those pills, and all prescribed. So I had a massive tolerance and a massive addiction, but got through it. And to say sick doesn't even scratch the surface. But I also knew or thought, you know what, I've got to feel this pain and experience this, because it will make it so horrific about the thought of ever going back. And
Right.
and so, I did. I got through it. It was, a couple of weeks of hell, but came out on the other side. And it took me a long time to rewire my brain. I took a break from alcohol, about a 6-month break, and then started drinking again. And so I was off the pills, but I was drinking, and it's a very slippery slope. I don't even know how slippery. There's no version for me of one and done. There's no version of casually drinking. I've tried everything. I'll have beer and wine, no hard alcohol, or all the tricks that we play. For me, it's one drink becomes an absolute obsession. And I stopped fooling myself. I've been sober now from alcohol. It's going on 9 months. I had 3 years of not drinking, but I never acknowledged the depth of the problem that I had, because I always wanted to kind of give myself an exit, a backdoor exit.
Yeah.
So I never really went very public with it, because in going public with it, you're speaking truth to it, and you've got a different set of accountability.
Right.
I don't participate in AA, meaning I don't go to meetings and things. It's not a knock on that at all, but I don't personally. I do use the community app and a platform that keeps me accountable to myself. And then by talking about it and revealing it, it adds a layer of accountability, because there'd be no version of, so let's go out for a couple of beers, because once you're going to be like, what the f are you doing?
When you went back to Texas and started this cleanup, did you have any support around you, friends or family that were cheering you on and helping you through those darker days of withdrawals? Or was this strictly you did it all on your own?
I really did it on my own. And when I moved, Andy, who is my partner, I really went into her world, and it was a new relationship. We met first in 1992, so we'd known one another, but not really knew one another. She knew what was happening. She wasn't aware of the depths of it. She doesn't have an addiction problem. And she certainly hadn't been around a person at that stage of her life who had a wild drug problem. So I was ashamed.
Right.
I have a hard time asking for help anyway. For me, it was the best path was just to suffer through on my own. She would check on me and things like that, but it was definitely a solo journey.
That's amazing that you had that turnaround, right? Because you had already tried rehab twice, and the fact that you went once and then went back again, and that didn't impact you enough to make the change, and yet you were able to do it on your own is pretty amazing.
Yeah, something shifted inside of me, and it really,
Yeah.
I have to do this or I'm going to die. And going through withdrawal, it was kind of 50-50 of which direction I wanted to go. It was like an inner voice, an inner strength, and each day would get better after a certain point, and I could see what life may be on the other side. Once you're past a certain point, 24, 48 period of time, it's like, well, God, I've really been through hell now. I can't start the clock over, I've already gone through this. So let's just keep going, one foot in front of the other.
What was it like the first 24 hours being off everything? What did your body go through?
It's like you've got an alien inside of your body screaming. It's the horrific scenes that we've seen in movies is pretty much what it is. It's physical, it's emotional, it's mental, and really on top of that, it's spiritual. It's a very dark and scary place.
I bet.
And there's no relief. That's the thing. You eventually get there. I looked at doing Suboxone programs and things like that. And I was like, okay, I know myself well enough. Then I'm going to be addicted to Suboxone. And the reality is I don't want to be on anything I don't want to be any med. And I was on Percocet, Oxycontin, and on top of that, many other things that I'd been prescribed, but I'd just gone down this crazy path. I really wanted to have a clean break, and I went through the fire to get there.
When you lose everything you've worked so hard for, your home in LA was absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. Looking back on life, I could have done things so much differently. But I think certain things had to happen. And I was a hard case, I guess. And so it wasn't like, being punched in the gut. It was like taking a jackhammer to my head was what was required to get through to me.
Right.
As much as I regret not taking better care of the things I'd worked for and taking better care of myself and of my relationships and such, I'm forever grateful. If that's what it took, and apparently it did, then that's what it took. And it's part of my journey. I have to think so much ego and things like that, that if used in the wrong way could be a very dark force. And for me, it was. So I guess the abject humility of no longer having the kind of access I had to money and power, because they were just gone. So it's like, holy shit, now what do I do? But the first thing I knew that I had to do was at least be clear-minded to start setting a path forward of rebuilding. So it's like just being totally stripped down.
We're strong people in general. You and I are both the type of person, and I've talked about this on other podcasts, where it can be tough to ask for help.
Yeah.
That in itself is admittance of, I don't have what it takes to get through this on my own. I need help. And that's really hard for us. We didn't have people stepping in and controlling what we did or what we didn't do. And we had to make decisions on our own at a very young age.
Yeah.
I know how to get through it. Nobody's been here to help me. I can do this on my own. I don't need you. Thank you very much.
Wow.
But the reality is, it sure is nice when we've learned that lesson and have reached out for help. And it makes such a huge difference when you have a support system.
Oh.
So given where you were when you made this courageous decision to change your life to where you are now, what's different?
I think the most radical change is that I've gotten to know who I am. We talked a little bit about using whatever substance to get out of yourself and to escape and to almost creating a fantasy world and identifying as that certain person who really wasn't the real me.
Right.
It was like I was play acting or something.
You were in your own movie.
I was in my own movie. And part of that, as you know, my mom died in December of 23. And so much of the person, and I know your mom has passed, and my dad's gone too, and I know your dad's gone. I think when you lose your parents, and I know when I lost my mom, I felt incredible grief. And my mom and I had tight, we were kind of, it was almost like a trauma bond from the time I was born. And that. And when she passed, it was incredibly sad and in grief and all of those things. But there was also a sense of relief. And when I say that, I don't mean a relief that she was gone or there wasn't the responsibility. It's that part of my identity, or what I come to identify myself as, and some of it was real heavy stuff that I identified with, was gone. It was like releasing a bit of a weight. Like I no longer had to be or feel a responsibility to be, kind of not the outlier of our family dynamic, or the black of, or the one who took care of mom, or the one who carried the secrets, or all of that stuff that had been part of my birthright. I also had some really positive stuff too, so I don't want to imply that it was so horrific, but some of those negative things that had been part of my identity that I was carrying no longer existed. And it was a real growth. We had her memorial in Houston in February of 24. And I got sober from alcohol, from everything, but from alcohol in June of 24. It happened really quickly after my mom's passing. And I think that the evolution of my journey, and it including her passing, had a lot to do with my ability to recognize I've got to change this. This is a problem. So I think I think that also helped in my path.
Yeah, you went through post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
You had Andy, she was new in your life. Did you to talk about your experiences, your emotions, everything that you were going through?
Yes, I'm able to share and that kind of thing. But with her, what was different is that she gave a good example, and led by example, in the way that she leads her life, wildly honest, honest with herself and honest outwardly. And for me, I don't really have to pretend. It doesn't have to be this huge drama, but I also don't have to pretend and carry a mask and everything's okay, or the mask, everything's so dark, because it was a blend for me, really helpful and continues to be. He's a strong personality who calls me on my stuff, which I need.
She's a role model. She gives you a lot of nutrients to your spirit and soul.
Yes.
To help you grow as a person. Now you've met somebody who's shown you that the decision you made to clean up was the right choice, but look at the life you can live without that stuff and thrive, right? You don't have to hide behind the drugs and the alcohol to get through life. You can actually spend some time talking to somebody, and that in itself can be very therapeutic. Or maybe there's other things that you've discovered to help you in those moments of, shit, today doesn't feel like a great day. How am I going to cope with it?
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the things I've done are not retreating and isolating, which I was a big one for me. And so being present, try to be super mindful of being in the present, not living in the past, not getting so caught up in the future. And that feels very grounding to me. The place that we live, in Taos, is its own centered, energetic, healing place.
It's like a retreat, especially from LA, right?
Exactly. And thank God, it's so incredible to be here. Things turned around on my work front so fast from really the moment I put down in June. I would say within months, it's done a 180. And so it was my clarity, mental clarity that I got, and also, self-confidence. And I think, it's, now that I'm, more engaged and have started figuring out, areas that I'm really interested in and want to participate in, whether it's developing projects or on the consulting side or what have you, being really present in each one of those. And that takes a lot of time. It takes, and to be fully immersed in that, and I have to be busy. I just do. And I have to be creative. Escaping and numbing yourself is the worst possible way that my existence should be, because if I'm numb and not proactive and working in something, it's just way too much time that my mind, even though I say I'm numb, it's not really. It's still operating in an unhealthy way, a million miles an hour.
Are you able to be around people, friends, family at dinners or social events where there's alcohol being served?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Andy drinks. She has a glass
Okay.
of wine at night. So there's wine in the house. That's not a trigger for me um, so much. Triggers for me are emotional states. I say probably my biggest trigger is anger. Anger is a difficult emotion for me that I wanted to escape from. But what's so interesting about this process is that it is a little bit chicken and the egg because when I'm not using, I'm far less angry, you know? So you deal. And so now if a situation comes up and I'm just extremely bothered, it doesn't have the same level of intensity that it had while I was using. Um,
And is that because you have a new way of coping? You said Andy's very transparent, she's very honest. Do you feel like you've adopted that as well, and that's how you get through moments of anger?
I've learned to, number one, things don't escalate as quickly. And when I say escalate, I mean an internal escalation. I have adopted a better sense of stepping away, kind of the self tape. Is this really such a big deal? I would say it's irritating and it doesn't have to be this all consuming thing. Um, I think taking whatever it is, a break or a walk, or I mean, some of these really fundamental things that we do know, count to 10 works great. Or redirect, step away, and let me put it in perspective. And I think what I've realized, and I can be very hypersensitive and feel impacted. It's like, okay, wait a second. I think you're tripping. I think that's really in your head. This is not something. So I kind of got that ability to be like, why is this bothering me so much, or what have you? So I think it's a combination of being aware and like, oh God, this is just a me thing.
Knowing yourself really well to a point where I now know what this is. I need to take a break and see this through. Whatever that trigger or moment is, there's times where I might get absolutely stressed out about something, and it's like, oh, if I just have a drink, I'll feel better. Maybe you just step away. Maybe you lay down on the floor and
Mhm.
put some calm meditation music on.
Yep.
And it could be 1 minute of that, and all of a sudden you're in a very
It,
different state.
it's
And you're
yeah.
like, holy shit, how come I never did this before? This works like magic.
Yeah, it's true. It could just be 2 minutes and it's like, oh, I have a totally different perspective instead of just laying into that one and then just complicating it. It's like I was complicating so many things. And I think part of it would be a bit of an excuse, you know? So it's like, well, this happened. So this gives me permission to. Those skills, which I'm honing and probably will be until the day I leave this planet, getting to know who I am and also trusting that person is important.
Right.
Kind of honoring that person and trusting that person. And as I get to know myself better.
A lot's changed in your life from when you were young. Life can be hard at times, but we get to create the enjoyment around us.
Absolutely. And hang on to every piece of joy that we have. It's like gold. It's one being really grateful for those moments and trying to stay in gratitude. I was never really an entitled person, I don't think. I'm sure there were aspects. Sure. Everything had to be torn down for me. I was a difficult case to crack. So everything stripped away. It's amazing how grateful you are for small victories and or things that are perceived small, but are in fact really big deals. And so it's just a different existence.
But as complicated of a case that you felt you were, your story is so unique in terms of being able to do this alone, making the decision to turn it around because you realize that wasn't serving you. Not everybody makes it through the way that you did. It's really tremendous you were able to do that. And you're on the other side.
Yeah.
It's really
No.
commendable. I've never heard a story where someone can do this on their own. You really were ready to make a change, and the universe was there to support you and help you
Yeah.
get through it.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was just driven internally. I had to do it. I really didn't have a choice. I mean, it was either do it or die, really.
You didn't wanna
I didn't
die.
wanna.
That was a big reason for you to say, "I'm not ready to go yet. I need to change this."
Yes.
I'm very proud of you, friend.
Oh, thank you.
You've
Yes.
really gone through something very tough. You and I have gone through cancer, we've gone through divorces, but I gotta believe for you, this trumped everything.
For sure. It was the most difficult of any of it, and
Yeah,
symptomatic of other stuff, so without dealing with that, there was no getting a life. There was no version of remaining active in addiction in any of its forms, whether it was opiates or alcohol. There was just no way to fully participate in life and create
right.
successful, you know, thriving life.
Yeah. As we wrap up, to anybody listening who knows somebody, maybe they're going through this themselves, what advice would you give them?
There is a path forward, there is recovery, but you do have to be an active participant in that. However, you choose to, if you're questioning whether, I'll just say from the person who perhaps may be suffering from addiction, if you're already questioning that something's up, something's up. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, something's up. They say getting the denial piece of it is, and the acceptance of that you have a problem is the first step. It is the first step. It's the absolute first step. And then I think then making active choices, and whether that active choice is, reaching out to someone, going to a meeting, a therapist. I mean, whatever form, I think it's not one size fits all, or whatever combination of things that can help you get out of it. The bottom line is, in my experience, there's no way of kind of using or kind of being in, or one foot out, one foot in, if you're struggling from a true addiction. There are no half measures. It
Right.
doesn't work that way. I think much of it is coming to terms with that, and the
Mhm.
beauty on the other side. There's just such an incredible difference. I think that overcoming and having a healthy respect for an addiction that you've come out of, there is a sense of beating something, of successfully moving through a negative aspect of a person's life.
You're the perfect model for that. I'm, incredibly proud of you for recognizing what was going on with yourself, taking action to make that change, and more than anything, sharing that story here for everybody to listen to, because you don't get exposed to these stories where someone has conquered this on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. And for someone who may have a friend or a loved one or whatever who's struggling, I think it's so important to acknowledge that. I know difficult, because it's like we're kind of trained to be polite and that kind of thing, or fear of losing the friendship or offending someone or whatever. I think honesty is absolutely the best way, whether it's, hey, what's going on? Because I've noticed this. What's happening? I'm here to talk. How can I help you? Even if it's
Mhm.
pushed away, but it does, in my opinion, resonate in that person's mind of, it's not about shaming, it's about an acknowledgement, because, trying to hide and shuffle things around or pretend like something's not happening when it's like, okay, oh my, the house is burning. I'm like, hello, you know, I think it helps crack that door, I think, is helpful. And what it also does is it preserves the sanctity of the other person, not the addict, but the other person, because you're not saying I'm buying into your make believe lands. So it puts up some boundaries, and I think that's a necessity.
I've enjoyed everything that
too.
you've shared. I've learned a lot from the conversation that we've had. I'm sure many people listening have also. I appreciate the honesty, the courage to even come forward and share this. And I know it'll make a change for somebody.
I hope there's a positive impact. What's healthy for me too, it's speaking into something and revealing.
Right.
Also, it's helpful in both ways.
Amorette's story is truly heroic. It's remarkable how she bravely decided to make this change in her life and for her ability to overcome such a profound addiction. What really struck me was her emphasis on the importance of taking active steps towards recovery. She highlighted that there's no single magic bullet. It's about making choices, reaching out to a friend, a support group, a therapist, or it could be a combination of these approaches, depending on what works best for the individual that's trying to overcome this addiction. As she wisely pointed out, recovery is a personalized journey, and it's up to us to make those choices. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.